Hey guys, Chelsea Knox with eXp Realty. I am back with another video. This week it's going to double as like a what agents should and shouldn't do, as well as kind of some advice for buyers out there who are going through or maybe are about to go through a home purchase. So I'm going to use an example of my last transaction that closed a couple weeks ago, and it was a really easy transaction in the beginning and ended up being a really messy bad transaction at the end. And so we're just going to highlight it. So the beginning, obviously everything went well. We don't really need to spend too much time on that. Our offer was chosen out of multiple offers on the home, like any house in the market right now. It's absolutely crazy, but everything was good. Everything was super easy until we did the buyer's walkthrough the day before. And so the buyer's walkthrough, I always have my clients do a buyer's walkthrough the day before closing or just before closing. And that is basically when your buyer walks the property, there should be no furniture in the house, everything should be empty and pretty much the condition that they're going to get it when they sign their closing documents the next day. So we walked and we started downstairs, a 2-story house. We started downstairs and everything looked normal. There was no major damage. The house actually looked pretty clean. You know, the curtains were on the wall in the study downstairs, which is one of the things we were paying attention to. And there was decorative fireplace logs in the fireplace downstairs as well, which is another thing that we were paying attention to. So my job as a realtor is to manage my clients' expectations. So I make sure that I let them know when they're walking a home, this should stay with the property. This is not going to stay with the property, just so they're aware, but they also have the right to kind of negotiate that in or out depending on how they want it. So this particular situation, the client wanted the blackout energy efficient curtains that were hanging on the walls, which should have been included with the home. They also wanted the decorative fireplace logs. They wanted a couple other things too, but they're not relevant to the story, so we're just going to skip those. And so downstairs, they had the curtains on the walls, and they had the decorative fireplace logs. So everything was looking really good. Everything was clean, no damage. We go upstairs, and they took all of the curtains out of all of the bedrooms off the wall, which was really disappointing because according to the contract, those should convey with the sale of the property. We did not exclude those. I did not make a note to exclude those because I knew we wanted them, and I had assumed that the seller's agent was also on par with the contract requirements. I assumed he knew how to do his job, which maybe I should have micromanaged him a little bit more, but I try to give everybody the benefit of the doubt that you know how to do your job and you don't need to be micromanaged, because this isn't a micromanaging field. Anyway, so we finished up the buyer's walkthrough. Everything else looked good. No major damage. Nothing we were too concerned about. There was also a panel that was hidden behind the TV previously that had exposed insulation. It looked like maybe like a handyman job that was not professionally done with wiring, electrical wires that were touching insulation. It didn't look good at all. So those were our two big things. So we hopped out of the house and I called the seller's agent immediately, and because we were closing the next day, so there's not a lot of time. And I called the seller's agent and I was like, hey, number one, I'm not sure if it was an accident, but the curtains are missing. And he just said, oh, I didn't think you would want those. They're old. Okay, so number one, it doesn't matter if they weren't old, but it doesn't matter if they were or they weren't old. It doesn't matter if my client wanted them or didn't want them. Again, there's a legal contract drawn up, and in that contract it states that curtains and curtain rods stay with the property of the home unless specifically excluded in the exclusions part of the contract, and we did not have exclusions. So not sure where the agent was going with that, but it didn't matter if we wanted them or not. They were supposed to convey with the sale of the property. And so I did that. I did what was best for my client in that situation. I let the seller's agent know that my client noticed that they were missing. He can either have the curtains returned via FedEx, UPS, however he wanted to get them returned to us, or he could pay the monetary difference of the cost of replacing all of those curtains that were hanging, which would have been very expensive. And so of course he agreed to have his sellers FedEx the curtains back to my buyer, once they get settled in and find all their boxes and everything, which is fine. Now the wall I don't really know what to call it. It was meant for a TV console setup to where it hides your wires in the walls. It also had like weird European outlets, which were clearly added. And again, my thought process with this is to educate my buyer. He may have thought it was really cool, they may have thought it was not cool, but at the end of the day, if it wasn't professionally done, if there wasn't a permit, we don't know how well that they did when they were installing that, especially having wires touching insulation. There's a couple codes there that might be affected. As you know, a buyer, you don't want your house burning down because you moved in and there was a bad wire that got hot, caught the insulation, all that bad stuff. So you know, I reached out to the seller's agent and I just simply asked a question. So we're not, you know, we're not attacking each other here. It's just my job to understand. So I asked the seller's agent, you know, if this was done professionally, if there was a permit, all that good stuff. The seller's agent was able to prove that that was done when their sellers moved into the home. So their sellers didn't do any of that work. They have no idea what it is, who did it, nothing. So at that case, it's unfortunate. If we really wanted to, we could have postponed the contract. We could have asked for, you know, an inspection by an engineer, by an electrician to make sure everything was up to code. But my buyer just said, you know, I just won't use this. I'll just take the wires out so they're not live wires and we'll just cover it up and just move on. So it was an easy situation, but again, as a realtor, it's my job to make sure my client has everything that they need before closing. That is the purpose of that buyer's walkthrough. Super important. And so we got the wall situated and then we got the curtains situated. Well, because we had those two things situated, everything else in the house looked good. We went to closing. We signed all the closing paperwork, everything funded. You know, the other realtor got paid, everything was closed, we were good to go. Well, I get a call from my buyer that they walked into the house, their new home, and the fireplace logs are missing out of the fireplace, which is really unfortunate. Those were there during the buyer's walkthrough. Because they were there, we did not mention anything about them because we assumed that the seller's agent knew how to do his job. And he didn't. So I was a little disappointed. I called the seller's agent, said, hey, you know, he didn't answer. I left him a voicemail, said, hey, my buyer just walked in the door. He's saying that the fireplace logs are not in the fireplace. Can you tell me what's going on with that? You know, those should have stayed as well. Unfortunately, probably because the seller's agent already was paid and we were already funded, he did not return my call. I gave him several text messages. He did not return my text messages. And so it's really unfortunate when you deal with agents like that. But again, at the end of the day, it is my job to make sure my client has everything that they wanted in that home that they bought. And so I just went ahead and purchased new ones for him. So, again, a perfect transaction in the beginning, and then everything just kind of got really sloppy at the end, and it could have been avoided just by the seller's agent doing his job and making sure that the sellers understood what they could take out of the home, what they could not take out of the home, and if they wanted it, just to add it to the contract. It would have taken 2 minutes to add it to the contract. I'm sure my buyer would have had no objections had we all been on the same page from the beginning. And so it's really important as a buyer's agent to make sure that my buyer, again, gets everything that they want and more. So that is really why you guys should hire a really good real estate agent. I do not recommend using, I'm not going to name drop the seller's agent in this story because I don't believe in like bashing other agents, but definitely make sure you know who you're working with before you get started. That way there's no surprises, nothing at the end that's going to make you upset or cause any kind of inconvenience whatsoever. So that is my story. I will probably be back with another video this week. Y'all stay tuned and have a great day.